But this question about a cop touching you to do a pat down is one I've seen people get in more trouble than almost anything else. Because the cop always makes it sound like it's not a big deal. Mind if I pat you down real quick? Real quick, like he just wants to borrow your pen. But what he's actually asking for is permission to put his hands on your body. And what you say in the next few seconds could determine whether the officer starts to get aggressive with you and you lose your constitutional rights, or if you maintain your privacy and end up driving home. But first, we have to identify the trap here, because if you don't see it coming, the words you say won't really matter. Mind if I pat you down? Listen to how that's phrased. Mind if I? It's a question, it's a request. But it doesn't feel like one, does it? It feels like a command wrapped in politeness, and that's exactly the point. Here's what's really happening. Mind if I is purely a consent trap. It's deliberately phrased as a polite request so that saying no feels like you're being rude, like you're the one being difficult, and that's by design. Officers are trained to ask it this way because they know that almost no one says no to a polite question with someone with a gun and a badge. Then there's the, mind if I pat you down real quick? Those two words do more heavy lifting than any other words in that sentence. Real quick makes it seem like it's nothing, like it's barely even happening. But let me remind you what a pat down actually is. It's a police officer running his hands across your entire body. Your chest, your back, your waistband, your pockets, your thighs. That's not real quick. That's a search of everything you got. And it's one of the most invasive things an officer can do to you, short of an arrest. Now, here's what most people don't think about. If you say sure, that's consent. If you say, go ahead, that's consent. If you shrug without being clear, the court could argue that's consent. If you don't say anything at all and maybe just put your hands up, the officer's going to argue your silence was consent. And once cops think they have consent, they can feel everything over your body, and if they don't like something, the way it feels, it may now allow them to search everything else, not only on your person, but everything else you have. But here's the key insight, and I want you to hear this. If cops are asking your permission to pat you down, it means they actually need it. Think about it. If cops already had what they needed legally to prove that you were armed and dangerous, that put them and their officer's safety at risk, they wouldn't ask you. They would just do it. But mind if I pat you down? That's a request that can be declined. If a cop asks, you always say no. If a cop orders, now you're starting to talk about whether you must comply. Now let me show you what happens if you say yes to this request, because this is where things go sideways fast. The officer starts patting you down. He feels something in your front pocket and he asks, what's this? Now you're on the side of the road trying to explain what's in your pocket. Maybe it's that prescription drug bottle you forgot about. So now if you're honest and you just hand him the bottle, now it's a conversation about drug use. What about that pocket knife you like to carry? Now the cop's calling it a concealed weapon and you should have told him ahead of time. That bulge in your pocket, maybe your wallet or your phone case, that now becomes the new probable cause to do a full search. But now I want you to understand why officers ask this question. Because they love to go on what we call fishing expeditions. They may not necessarily think you did anything wrong, they just know getting your consent is the easiest way for them to dig through all of your stuff. Now they don't need probable cause, no judge, no paperwork, no reasonable suspicion. Just your permission and your nervousness to justify anything and everything they want to search. And officers know another thing. When a person in authority asks to put their hands on you, the power dynamic makes saying no feel very dangerous. You're standing next to an officer with a badge. He's got backup and a gun on his hip. Every instinct in your body makes you feel like you have no choice, and you shouldn't make waves. Officers are trained to use that instinct against you. In fact, that's part of the techniques they learn in the academy. And here's the part that really matters, because once you say yes, it's almost impossible to take it back. Even if they're halfway through the search and you look through and say, stop officer, I don't consent, it's pretty much too late now, and they can use whatever they have already seen as a reason to keep going. Which brings me to the law, and this is the part cops hope you never learn. In Terry versus Ohio, the Supreme Court created the pat-down search. The court said that an officer can conduct a brief pat-down search only if he has reasonable articulable suspicion that the person is armed and dangerous. Not armed or dangerous, it's armed and dangerous. Both elements are required. A hunch won't work. A gut feeling's not gonna cut it. He seemed nervous, doesn't qualify. The officer must have articulable specific facts. You say, okay, Jeff, so cops can do this pat-down search, but how far can they go? This brings me to Minnesota versus Dickerson. This case created what was known as the plain field doctrine. The court ruled that if an officer feels something that is immediately identifiable as contraband, without squeezing it, without manipulating it, or without sliding it around to figure out what it is, then cops can seize that item. But the moment a cop has to feel it around, squeeze it, try to figure out exactly what it is, that goes beyond a pat-down search and he cannot keep going. But what if a cop speaks to you in such a way that makes it seem like it wasn't really a question, but it was an ultimatum and command? That brings me to Florida versus Bostick, where the Supreme Court ruled that consent must be voluntary. The court asks, would a reasonable person in your position feel free to decline the officer? And here's the most important part of all. Your refusal to give consent to search you can never be used against you. Let me say that again. If you refuse consent to a pat down, that refusal cannot be used by cops for any purpose whatsoever. Saying no is never suspicious. It's constitutional. So now you understand the trap, and now you know the law, and you know the cop's only asking you because he needs you to say yes. But here's the real question. How do you say no to an armed police officer staring you down 2 feet in front of your face without making the situation worse? The only way to deal with it is to say these exact words. Here they are. Memorize them. Officer, I do not consent to any searches of my person. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm exercising my rights. Why these words? Because refusing consent to the search of your person is very specific that you are not allowing the officer to do this, and you don't allow them to touch your physical body. You're making it personal because the officer's making it personal, and you're making it clear I don't consent to you touching me. Why say I'm not trying to be difficult? This is the disarming phrase. You recognize this officer is going to try to make you feel bad for saying no. So you're cutting it off at the pass by letting the officer know, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm aware of my rights and I'm standing up for them. And if the officer pushes back and looks at you and says, if you have nothing to hide, why won't you let me take a look? That's when you can look back at him, look at him square in the face and say, officer, I refuse consent to search. I refuse to answer any questions unless my lawyer is present. And here's the most important part, because if the officer gets tricky and pushes back and says, I need to still pat you down in order to check you for weapons in order to protect my officer's safety, it's important you now know to use these words. Officer, I understand you have a job to do, but I do not consent to a physical search. If you choose to pat me down without my consent, that's your decision.
Nobody haven't received a call from a victim out of the pacifier. Never.
1067. 1067.
1067.
I just got hit, and the guy's fleeing on foot right now. He's fleeing in the car right now.
What's your time?
Southbound on the turnpike, Mount Barker 29. It's a Honda Civic. The 20 out of floor is Echo, November. Yankee, 3-1, driving on the shoulder.
10-4. Street traffic. Repeat, station bound, to traffic.
We're getting off of Mount Barker 29. Still fleeing. He hit me hard from the rear. He reversed and took off. He's going to stop. We're approaching the traffic light, Northwest 41st Street. We're traveling eastbound. He's going single 12. Whiskey. He's trying to get back on the turnpike. He's driving single 12. We're going back southbound. Let me know to try to pin him here. Dispatch, did you get my 28? Echo, November, Yankee 3-1. A white Honda Civic. It's going to be a Hispanic or white male. Facial on his face, wearing a blue shirt.
That's central.
We're driving We're on the right shoulder, driving in front of the phone for right shoulder, we're traveling. That's 10-4, he hit my patrol car intentionally, he rear-ended me, reversed and took off. That's 10-4, he drove on the shoulder, I saw him, he rear-ended me, he reversed and took off.
Can you execute it?
10-4. Right now, we're approaching Southwest 8th Street.
Okay, can you listen? You're gonna get on now. Have another 37 do it. Okay, he's still the bike. He's still the bike. He's your exit. Hello. 678 northbound, southbound.
On the camera, they're going to be southbound at the 25, southbound at the 25. Stay Singapore.
I'll be here. I'm at the 23 right now. Eyes, 10-15. Any unit on scene, can you advise 10-15? East or west of Seizure?
23, we're trying to figure that out. I think we're back to 1079. They're going to be just north of.
If I could get any of my units on the scene, advise with 10-13, please. Anybody injured?
10-4, Lakewood to any unit on scene, can you advise 10-14?